At the beginning of this course, I told you that Windows PowerShell was not just a scripting language. And I wasn't kidding. If you've been paying attention, we're on Module 11 and we haven't written a single script yet. In fact, we're not even ready to start writing scripts yet. But let's talk about why we would write a script. First of all, we have been typing some pretty long and complicated command lines, and that gets tedious to retype over and over and over. More complex tasks might require multiple commands to be strung together, and that's why you write a script. Look, the deal is this. PowerShell is powerful enough that most of the time, you don't need to write a script for simple tasks. You can just do it in a one-liner. You tend to only turn to scripting when you have a very complex task that you need to repeat a lot. So you really don't see a lot of simple PowerShell scripts. You tend to see a one-liner or an insanely complicated PowerShell script. Now, when it comes time to scripting, the PowerShell script is a plain text file with a PS1 file name extension. Remember, scripts don't run by default. You do have to enable them to run by modifying the execution policy. When you do that, you can force them to be digitally signed. PowerShell will even digitally sign your scripts for you using the setAuthenticodeSignature signature commandlet. You also have to specify a path when you're running a script. That way you can avoid command hijacking. Now let's talk about the difference between scripting and interactive use. There gets to be a misperception that PowerShell is a shell that has a scripting language built in. That's not exactly correct. PowerShell is a shell, and part of that are some features that look like the programming elements we call scripting. It seems like a fine hair to split, I know, but there's a good reason for the distinction. Some folks tend to think of a shell and of scripting as different things. In PowerShell's case, they're not. Anything you do at the command line, you can put into a script file. Anything you put into a script file, you can type and run at the command line. In fact, you can open up a script, copy it to the clipboard, and paste it into PowerShell. It'll run exactly the way it should. This means you can kind of experiment with stuff in the shell, and once it's working, paste it into a script for long-term use, and you're good to go. PowerShell doesn't differentiate between ad hoc or interactive use and scripting. It's all the same thing. Windows Notepad is a bare minimum editing tool. It's expensive, costs $300 or more, but it does come with a complete copy of Windows, so that's kind of an offset. Right now, Microsoft does not produce a PowerShell editor. Instead, you're going to rely on third-party scripting environments, such as PrimalScript, which is what I recommended that you download, which is designed specifically for editing these scripts, and it gives you all kinds of features. Let's look at what script editing should look like when you're not using Windows Notepad. Here's what script editing in Windows PowerShell should look like. A complete integrated development environment where the syntax is color-coded, where I get pop-up menus for code hinting and code completion, where commandlet syntax is displayed in little pop-up tooltips, and where a single key press can call up PowerShell's built-in help in a separate window for me. This is Sapien PrimalScript, and it has a number of other PowerShell-related features, such as the ability to package scripts into standalone executables, which can run under alternate credentials. You can even run your scripts right within PrimalScript, meaning you don't need to go back and forth between the editor and the console window. You can do everything right here. It's much, much more efficient. The script language in Windows PowerShell is really simple. In fact, there's only about a dozen keywords that are considered part of the scripting language. Now, that does not mean those dozen or so keywords can't be used interactively at the shell. It's just that they're most often used in a script file, and so that's why they're kind of considered the scripting language. So here are the common questions on scripting. Can scripts have error handling? Can they accept input arguments so that they work a bit like commandlets? Do you need to have PowerShell installed in order to run a script? Yes, yes, and yes. Can you package a script into an executable? Yes, PrimalScript Professional and Enterprise let you do that, although PowerShell still needs to be installed on the machine where you run the executable. Everything we're going to talk about when it comes to scripting, everything, can be done right from the command line. However, there are some topics that tend to go along with more complex administrative tasks, and you wouldn't normally just type them into the command line. You would put them into a script so that they're easier to do over and over and over. And those are the topics that are going to be coming up next.